Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It is time to check in with my library treasure hunt for the month of April. This is a project where I go scour the shelves of my library looking for underrated hidden gems that I haven't seen people talking about here on BookTube at all. So this month took me to the nonfiction shelves, and I picked up Archipelago of Hope by Gleb Raygorodetsky. And this book, at the time of recording this, has 195 ratings, 34 reviews, and a 4.08 average on Goodreads. So certainly underrated. I found this very accessible and easy to read, given that it is kind of more scientific and nature-focused nonfiction. It reminded me very much of Eating to Extinction that gained some popularity here on BookTube over the BookTube prize. So I think this would be a very natural fit for the same audience here on BookTube. That book, Eating to Extinction, focuses on really short form, a couple page essays about a food item that has kind of fallen out of favor and gone toward extinction. And it talks through the history of that, why that's happened, what the positives of that food, that sort of heritage food are, and efforts potentially to bring a food back. And so those are very rapid fire, short form. This feels very similar in kind of structure and content, but it's much more focused on a slow telling of an ecosystem, I would say, and Indigenous life within that ecosystem. So one of the things I really appreciated about Raygorodetsky's approach in this is that he's diving in immediately into Indigenous peoples in parts of the world that are really underexposed, under-discussed, not in the areas of the world that are prominently really featured when we do talk about Indigenous life and culture. So at the very beginning, at the onset, and probably the first half of the book is completely focused on tribes that are in very cold weather populations. So we're talking about in Finland, the Nordic and Arctic areas. So primarily like reindeer herding tribes, but we focus on different aspects of their lives. Indigenous heritage practices that are really integral to daily life and survival for that people group. So with the first three, we do talk about reindeer herding as an element of that, but I think only one of them, that's the central aspect that is touched on. For the remainder, that comes up, but we're talking through the entire ecosystem and many things beyond just the one thing that's focused. And it's in a very sort of slow, gentle style where you feel like you're kind of being welcomed into this community to hear about what their life is like. And I just very much enjoyed that style of storytelling in a nonfiction book. It really gave us a sense of what's important to them day to day. But we also walk through the challenges that they are facing to maintaining that way of life. And I would say centrally that focuses on aspects of climate and environmental change that peoples are having to adapt to. But we also have elements that are sort of the story we all know from the Western world, where the people in power outside of this Indigenous people group have taken resources, and they're continuing to have to fight to maintain resources on their land. The sort of manipulation and trickery that's gone on in the past that has led to them losing land or resources. Things like residential schools, much to my chagrin, came up more than I would have expected. We know that story, hopefully most of us, for the US and Canada, but it's apparently something that has been very common throughout the entire world. South America and even the Russian Orthodox Church comes up here as having residential schools, having gone together with the government to try to erase this way of life. And so there is a constant battle there that has been fought. And the hope of the title is that because practices have survived constant challenge over long periods of time, very often there is much we can learn from those practices that these Indigenous peoples have maintained over these long periods. There's a reason why they have persisted. And so looking at things like biodiversity being very important for our continued survival, homogeneity has proven to be rampant with problems. And that comes up excessively in the previous book I mentioned, Eating to Extinction. It's mentioned here that 80% of biodiversity remaining in the world exists on Indigenous land, which is massive. And I have to assume, at least partly, that's because of the lack of excessive overdevelopment on that land, in part. But as well, there is so much about caring and understanding the symbiotic relationship between people and nature that goes into the day-to-day living and sustaining survivability for these peoples. And so I thought that was the beautiful element that I took away from this, really. And I guess I will pivot to the way this ends. It doesn't end with a call to action to replicate what they're doing. It doesn't at all, because it's variable. It changes with where you are and what your conditions are and the specific natural condition and local regional access that each person has. And so if you're someone who lives in an apartment in a city, there's almost nothing that you could directly implement. But very perfectly, Raygorodetsky doesn't end with telling us exactly what to do. Instead, he calls us to be allies to these people, to remove those barriers and challenges that they're facing, to work towards that shared future where we're collaborating, where we're sharing knowledge, because things like lymphoma treatments specifically are brought up, were adopted and turned into traditional medicine from Indigenous practices, Indigenous natural medicines. And so it can be both. We can learn from one another, change, grow, and adapt. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. It's brought up things like taking snowmobiles to herd reindeer does not work out very well. It has some benefits, but it mostly has downsides for the people who are trying to herd the reindeer. And so it can go either way. But if we aren't willing to extend the olive branch and be cooperative, be respectful about these Indigenous practices in a way that hasn't been done in the past, I think that level of respect is something that we just need to continue building. And I feel like books like this really, really help to do that. But in addition to the book, I have to be very thankful that this book exposed me to the Nautilus Book Prize, because it was a winner. The Nautilus Award recognizes books and audiobooks that promote spiritual growth, conscious living, positive social change, while at the same time they stimulate the imagination and offer the reader new possibilities for a better life and a better world. That is such a great premise for a book prize, and they have all age categories, loads of different types of books. I can't believe I haven't ever heard of this book prize here on BookTube. That's crazy. So it completely opened up a new reading list for me. I will definitely be dabbling in the Nautilus Book Prize selections as well. So with that, as I said, Archipelago of Hope is 100% a hidden gem that I think you should absolutely check out if you have any interest in this topic. I think it is something that we can all learn and grow from. So with that, thank you so very much for watching.